Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. China's top diplomat Wang Yi continues his tour of the Nordic countries on Monday, just as security concerns across northern Europe continue to grow. Now, his visit comes alongside Russia's sudden closure of several railway border crossings with Finland, Estonia and Latvia, while Norway is stepping up surveillance and border security in the high north amid concerns over Russia and growing Chinese activity in the Arctic. Now, how this all impacts Europe, we'll now discuss with Teivo Teivainen, professor of world politics at the University of Helsinki. Good to have you back with us. Welcome.
Wonderful to be here. Good morning.
So if we're looking at the countries on the list that he's already visited, this is China's top diplomat. We're looking at Sweden, Finland, now also Norway on Monday. I mean, on the face of it as well, these are some of the most critical countries in Europe of China. Do you think that he will sway them to a different disposition after this trip?
Well, it seems the Chinese foreign minister is hoping to get something out of the more recent tensions that all Nordic countries, especially Denmark, of course, have had with the United States. To sort of make some progress. But it seems that the response, for example, here in Finland by Finnish Foreign Minister Elina Valtonen was that, look, for us, it's highly important that China takes into account that our biggest security concern is Russia. And if China supports Russia, then there will be at least some kind of consequences for our good relations. So these are the two main messages that have been floating during this visit.
Mm-hmm. And also what he's trying to gain out of this. I mean, obviously a diplomat, better relations. At the same time, I think also significant. I mean, for many, many years, visits have not occurred also specifically between China and Sweden. And this, I think, is one in many, I think, of 2 decades. Why the delay and why this visit now? And what does that also mean in terms of relations between not just Sweden, but the Nordics and China?
Of course, there are economic cooperation concerns and trying to avoid that the Nordic countries join the United States in sort of anti-China front. Between the Nordic countries, as you mentioned, Sweden has sometimes had complications with China. Also, more generally, Sweden has been more outspoken about human rights of foreign powers than countries like Finland that have maintained a more moderate tone in criticizing, avoiding to criticize countries like China, Russia. Sweden had its incident once on Swedish. There was Chinese tourists were trying to enter a Swedish hotel and they were somehow kicked out, couldn't be let in. And this created a big momentary tension in China-Swedish relations. So there are differences between the way Nordic countries have approached China, but today there seem to be a little bit less differences, and China is trying an overall strategy, visiting all these countries at the same time.
Mm-hmm. It also coincides with what will now be the NATO summit in Ankara. That's also starting tomorrow. I mean, this is maybe no coincidence there in time. Do we read too much into the timing? And what is, let's say, the impact of that? I mean, these are also staunchly Nordic, but staunchly NATO supportive countries.
I don't think it's a coincidence that this is just before the NATO summit. Of course, now there's a lot of talk of coincidences, the Irani funeral and US 250 celebrations and all that. But this might be the most important and strategically thought of consequence that this visit is happening right before the NATO summit. And now that all Nordic countries are NATO members, the strategic importance of Northern Europe is within NATO is obviously greater than ever. So hopes of achieving something by Chinese foreign minister are very strategically focused on Northern Europe now.
And also, speaking of Northern Europe, just want to get your sense of what's happened as well recently with Russia closing several border rail stations. I think 5 of them in Finland, Estonia as well, and then also in Latvia. There's no official explanation at this point in time. And how significant are these closures? I mean, there was already a lot of closure on the Finnish side as well, but Russia's, is there any signaling here? How do you interpret that?
In Finland, that particularly closure of railways has not been seen with great publicity or concern. The border, for most practical concerns, has been closed all the time. People who want to travel to Russia do it mostly via other countries. So I wouldn't read too much in it, at least from a Finnish perspective. Of course, more generally, there's this overall concern of threat by Russia. Nobody seems to think there might be an imminent attack, but Russia's rhetoric has gotten more aggressive, obviously also along with new NATO membership of Finland and Sweden. Also here in Nordic countries, I think we note more similarities with Poland and the security political situation of Poland, where concerns about Russia have been much more important and rooted historically than here in Finland, for example, in recent decades. So it seems our countries are looking at Poland as a possible reference point, benchmarking, strategic ally, and other things much more than before.
Yeah, and we've observed that connection, that cooperation, as you said, much more with Nordic countries, Norway specifically, also Sweden, well, in fact, all of them, and Poland very much. I mean, sharing very much the imperative of looking at to be ready against any threats by Russia. I want to ask you one more thing also in the High North. I mean, we have the European Commission has allocated around 16 million euros for border defense, security surveillance, especially with that Norwegian-Russian border. At the same time, just with China as well, we don't talk about that much, but what is China's role in the Arctic as well? Do they have interests there? How much are they perceived as a threat? What's the footprint of China in the High North?
Well, it's kind of obvious that also with global climate change, the Arctic ice is melting, which opens new trade routes for China to, north of Russia, and that has not only commercial but also security implications. So this is something that has been observed for a few years now, with very close attention in Finland. The security situation in the Arctic is becoming with more tensions. There are new minerals that can be extracted when the ice melts, and the security struggles are likely to get more heated up. Of course, the Greenland debate is one, but only one implication of the more important position of the Arctic in the way it's perceived here in the Nordic countries.
Yeah, and I think in terms, you mentioned it there, Greenland, I mean, we see these flashpoints on occasion when everyone we watch to one thing in the High North, but generally, where do you see, just before we wrap up, where do you see all this going, the Arctic, the High North right now, let's say major issues in these next few months ahead?
Well, one thing is probably the connection between the Arctic and High North security concerns, and then security concerns in further south around Poland, for example. For Norway, it's clear the Arctic situation is of higher importance than for Finland, for example, whereas Finland perhaps connects through the Baltics more also with Central European sort of concerns. So I would think that within NATO there's much more talk about how to connect the Arctic concerns with concerns of countries like Poland, and this will probably have implications for cooperation between Poland and Nordic countries in the future.
All right, giving us this there from the High North and the Nordics. Always a pleasure having you. Teivo Teivainen, Professor of World Politics at the University of Helsinki. Thank you. And thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.